Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining me. Today I wanted to check out a book tag video that I really enjoyed. I first saw this video by the creator, actually, Daniela, over at Only If for a Page, a fantastic booktube channel that everyone should go check out. I will leave a link to both her channel and her video in the description below. So thank you, Daniela, for watching it. No one tagged me in this one. I just saw a couple people's videos, including Daniela's, and I thought it was really interesting, and immediately a few things popped to my mind that I wanted to talk about. So let's just get right into it. So the tag's all about contradictions. It's the general way each of the questions go is either you loved or hated this, but liked or hated this. First question is, so a book you didn't like from a genre you love. So there were a couple thoughts going through my head for this one, but I have to apologise to Cliff over at Cliff's Dark Gems because he suggested to me this book. But a genre I love, and I've made a whole video about it, it'll be in the corner, is like horror books in caves. I just adore the claustrophobic isolation of caves, and the book that I read I actually DNF'd and really didn't like was Midnight Lair by ℓ𝕬𝕜. I've read a couple layman's before. They've never been my favourite books, and the problems I kind of had with them were here right off the bat in this one. From the very first couple pages was just very repeated sexual descriptions and sexualization of our lead female character, who is a young woman, young girl, and you couldn't go 2 paragraphs without some sexualization of her, some comment about her figure, about her body. Within the first few pages she gets naked and gets spied upon, and I very quickly was uninterested. I don't like the threat of that sort of thing, of sort of sexual violence of any way. I don't find the threat of that in horror books enthralling or enticing. I think it's pretty cheap. And so I just don't love those books that kind of, at least for a part of their horror, rely on that. And so I ended up putting it away because I was just feeling a bit uncomfortable. Question 2 is a genre that you rarely read, but a book that you loved from it. And the genre that I rarely read is crime fiction. Crime fiction really interests me. I like the idea of that sort of dark thriller mystery sort of book, but I get turned off by it because every time someone suggests a crime book to me, I pick it up and it's, someone suggests to me this one, it's, a murder at Oslo or something completely made up. And it sounds really cool. I pick it up and on the back it says, book 12 of the Detective Sampson series. And I know with crime fiction you're supposed to be able to just kind of pick up anything in a series and be fine. But the few times I've tried that, the first few pages are all talking about characters from previous books and relationships from previous books that I feel like, I would have a better experience reading book 12 of the Detective Sampson series if I'd read the first 11 books. And I don't want to read that many books just to get to the one book that everyone says is really good. So that's my problem with crime fiction. I think next year I'm going to really try and get into crime fiction. So if you have any suggestions for crime fiction books, leave them below. But the book that I read that I really liked, and it breaks this rule because it is a, book X of Detective Whatever series, is The Devotion of Suspect X by 𝕤𝕦𝕚𝕚 Higashino. Maybe. And I just loved this book. The twists and the revelation at the end was fantastic. The entire way through the book, I was confused. I didn't know how things weren't clearing together. The premise is there is a murder, and we know, or we think we know, the murderer and the circumstances. And we see things from both sides, from the side of the murderer trying to get away with it, and from the side of the investigators investigating it. And it has that perfect clicking into place at the end, where that one missing piece of information comes to you and recontextualizes everything you've read. Every single bit then just clicks in place. Every action that was confusing, every question that didn't make sense just has an answer. And it's the sort of twist that maybe you could figure out beforehand, but I feel like it's the best sort of twist, where you probably can't figure out beforehand, but it makes perfect sense and just clicks into place and all the dominoes fall over. And it's just this moment of revelation. I've also read Malice by the same author, and I love that one as well. I think Devotion of Suspect X is just slightly above for me. And I do have, I think, 2 other books of his that I'll get to. But yeah, so I don't often read crime fiction, but those 2 books were fantastic. I've got two answers for this next one. The next one is, what is a trope you love? And then a book that did that trope that you didn't like. And I've got two answers. The first one might be a little bit unpopular. It's a bit of a booktube darling, I think. But the trope I really like is I love it when books are set in letters or, diary entries or that sort of thing. And the book that did that fell kind of flat for me was This Is How You Lose the Time War by 𝕬𝕚𝕟𝕚𝕚 and Max Gladstone. Sorry for any names I mispronounce, I'm terrible at it. My issue here was the world building was fantastic. I was super interested in that. I don't read a lot of romance, and there was definitely a romance subplot going through this book, but that, again, wasn't a problem for me. I actually quite liked it. My problem with this book, and it's one that shocks me because the premise is there's two characters writing letters to each other. They're on opposite sides of this big time-traveling war. So there's two different characters writing letters to each other, and each of the characters' letters are written by one of the two authors. And yet, I felt it was very hard to find a difference between the two characters. I felt they were basically the same person, and there may be storyline reasons for that, but they kind of both wrote with the same voice. Like, if I just took an excerpt straight from the middle of one of any of the letters, really, as long as it doesn't mention any names in it, I feel like I'd be very hard pressed to tell you which character wrote it. So it just kind of felt very samey all the way through. And I was shocked by that, because they're both written by different authors. I feel like they really should be very different. Overall, the book is good. I did enjoy it. I enjoy it less now than I did at the time. Looking back at it, it hasn't stuck with me. And the main issue is that I feel like we just had one character writing letters back and forth. And then the other one, I feel mean doing two answers for books I didn't like, but whatever. The other one is I adore death game stories, like the Saw movies, or there's a bunch of manga. Actually, there's a lot of manga. But I love death game stories, and the one I didn't enjoy was Puzzle House by Duncan Ralston. And my issue here really was that just the games themselves, the puzzles themselves, they're kind of like escape roomy puzzles. Just the logic was kind of flawed in a lot of them. A lot of them relied on things that just shouldn't happen, characters acting in ways that were dumb. The characters themselves were very generic and not super interesting. There was some redeeming moments in this book. It is fun to read, but I went in expecting it to be a lot better than it really was. And so yeah. The next one is the reverse. It's what's a trope you don't like, but done in a book that you do like, and then you do like the trope in that book. And this one is, I have gotten super sick of the chosen one trope. There's so many examples of books where I start out loving it until we find out that our main character is the chosen one. He's the descendant of a god. He's the one that has the special DNA. He's the only one immune to the alien thing. And I hate the chosen one. I know that that's an easier story to write. It's a more traditional story, but I really prefer stories about regular people rising to an occasion rather than finding out that you were always destined for this crap. But saying that, the book series that did it, and I loved, was Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson, all three of the Mistborn trilogy. I've got video reviews up for all three of these, so I won't go too deeply into it here, but there's definitely an element of the chosen one sort of going on here, and while, again, I feel like I would have preferred if it wasn't there, it was done really well here, and I don't really have any complaints. Next up, what is a book you didn't like by an author you love? This was a bit hard for me until I remembered a review I just very recently did up in the corner, and that is Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick. 𝕬𝕝 is one of my favourite books of all time. Top 5 sci-fi, probably forever. One of just amazing. I love that book. The more I think about it, the more I love that book. Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049, two of my favourite movies of all time. So I went into Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep with 1, very high expectations, and 2, some probably wrong expectations. I expected it to be cyberpunk. I expected it to be closer to Blade Runner than it is. I didn't do my research beforehand. I didn't know that Blade Runner was just kind of inspired by rather than based on. I didn't know that there were big differences between the two. And as pointed out to me by an Australian author, Kim Miller, that you should check out in a comment on my video, I went in with such strange expectations that I kind of missed one of the main plot points, one of the main arguments and contradictions that are in the story, because I was so expecting this to be Blade Runner, android, cyberpunk sort of story. But saying that, I didn't enjoy my time with it, and it's probably entirely my fault. But yeah, that's an author I love, Philip K. Dick, Ubik, and Do I Just Dream of Electric Sheep fell flat for me. And then the opposite is kind of harder. It's what is an author you don't like or didn't like, and then a book you read that you did like by them. And this is hard because I don't often read a book, because I don't really make a habit of reading books by authors whose other works I didn't like. I feel like I've got so many books and, so little time on this world that risking it on books by authors that I've already not liked the work of is a bit troublesome. But I do have one example. The book that I didn't love, I didn't hate it, I thought it was fine, was Hell House by Richard Matheson. I feel like it's kind of a riff on, a retelling of, a reimagining of The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson, I think. And this one was just a bit, I don't know, it was fine. It's not very memorable. I read it a while ago, but I remember coming away from it thinking it was fine. Not particularly scary, not particularly thought-invoking, but, a fairly regular haunted house story. But then I was informed I really should read some more Matheson work, so I read ℚ𝕚𝕚𝕚, and oh my god, that book is amazing. This is almost the opposite of 𝕬𝕚𝕚𝕚 Dream of Electric Sheep, because in this one, I'd seen the movie ℚ𝕚𝕚𝕚 and really didn't care for it, thought it was pretty meh. But then read the book and thought it was amazing. I can't believe the two were married in any way. They just seemed completely separate to me. But yeah, ℚ𝕚𝕚𝕚 by Richard Matheson, the story of like the last, as far as he's aware, human survivor in this zombie, vampire-y sort of apocalypse, is just amazing. It's brilliant. You really should check it out. Alright, up next, a book with a fantastic cover that you didn't end up liking. This one was a bit hard for me, but I did find one, and it is North American Lake Monsters by 𝕤𝕚𝕚𝕚𝕚. This is a short story collection of horror stories with this fantastic cover and the fantastic premise of lake monsters and, scary monsters that just kind of fell flat for me. When I was reading it, I was recording my scores for each of the stories, and a couple of them got 3s, one of them I think got a 4, and the rest of them were like 1s. They just weren't memorable, they didn't provoke any thought or any sort of fear in me, they weren't scary. It just fell flat for me, and unfortunate because I was really excited about this one. And the last question was the one I actually had the most trouble with. What is a great book with a bad cover? And the issue here is I've got a lot of books on my shelf whose cover I don't love, but generally they have another version of that cover that I do like. And it's normally stuff like I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Ian Reid. Like, I have this cover, which I really don't like, the Netflix tie-in cover, any movie tie-in cover, big sticker on it, whatever, don't love. But it also has this cover, which I do really like, and I think fits the book a lot better. So, I've got a lot of examples like that, but I did think of one where the cover I have isn't some tie-in cover, it doesn't have plaster all over its stickers, and I think it's a cover people quite like. But I don't. But it is a book I loved, and that is Red Rising by Pierce Brown. I think the biggest issue to get people to read Red Rising is that they're gonna think it's a young adult book. It reads on the blurb like a young adult book, like a Battle Royale, Hunger Games sort of thing. And I don't think the cover's doing it any favours in that. I think the cover looks like a young adult book cover. And, maybe it is a bit YA, but it's more mature than that. The whole Red Rising series, I've read the first 3, feel way more mature than a Hunger Games or a Maze Runner or something along those lines. And I think it deserves a cover that looks a bit cooler than this. Maybe there is another cover that I haven't seen, but I'm not a fan of the big red wing. And that's that. That's my book tag video done. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comments below if you have any answers to these. If you know of any other covers that are from great books but look terrible. That was my favourite thing to think about. I would love to tag a couple of people in this one. First off is Monty from Monty Adkins Books. His channel is in the description below. Another great YouTuber you should check out. And again, another one that I think you should check out is Kevin from Kevin's Novel Advice. Again, link both in the description below. I'd love to see videos from the both of you. Thank you so much for watching if you still are, and just remember to keep reading.